What's up, everybody? Can everybody hear me okay? Gonna go live on Instagram. We'll say hi to my Instagram folks. Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. I haven't even seen you guys yet. This is great. I was waiting a little bit to kind of get a little bit of a break, get to see you guys, a little bit kind of ease into the new year, see what's going on. If you're checking in, if you're on Instagram, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, do me a favor, just leave me a quick little comment, hit the like button, all that good stuff. Kind of helps the algorithm and all that goodness, that algorithm goodness that we're all getting so used to here. Um, it's always kind of fun when I do this at late at night. It's like, don't have a ton of people on, which is great. So just make sure you just, while you're here, just let me know who you are and what you're doing. But as the weeks progress, like hundreds and hundreds of people see these videos, which gets me really excited. And I always have to remind myself, it's like speaking to a theater worth of people. So if you got a question for me, if you'd like me to answer, email me, or just if you're live here with me, you can leave me a message or just a comment wherever you're watching it. That should show up in my dashboard here. Or you can always email me at coachedwards@athletespecific.com. So lots of good stuff to talk about today. Obviously, it's a new year. Got to show this off. Hold on. My best. I don't know what you got for Christmas, but I got this. I got an autographed Fluffy Funko doll. Fluffy is one of my favorite comics, so I'm really really proud of this. Might have to remove my Olympic participation medal. I think that'd be kind of cool. Um, but lots of good stuff to talk about today. Last night, for instance, I don't care if you're not a fan of college football, but last night was the college football national championships, which in this whole world of COVID was kind of weird. But it's really if you don't fully understand this, college football is really the economic driver of college sports across the board. So, which is kind of funny because not funny, but it's what everybody's scrambling to hold together. So I want to talk a little bit about it kind of in the second segment tonight on what we can learn, because Nick Saban, the head coach of Alabama, who won his seventh national title, and he actually goes way back to having coached with Bill Belichick years ago. So a lot of you guys know Bill Belichick coached the Patriots. So I don't care if you're not a Patriots fan or a college football fan, there's good lessons to have there. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So for those of you guys that don't know me, so I'm Jonathan Edwards, Olympian Jonathan Edwards. I run a number of blogs, but here I run a website called athletespecific.com, and I run two coaching programs for athletes. One is called Mental Performance School, and the other one is called the Athlete Breakthrough Blueprint. So I work with, and I feel like I have to put a disclaimer. This is almost like one of those graphic content, signs that go on like a Twitter post or a Facebook post. I work with athletes and families who have big athletic dreams. Okay. So if you are not that person, what I may share with you may be offensive. And I've learned this in working with social media and working with um, just, I guess, having my voice out in areas where sometimes people aren't like that. They find that what I have to say is controversial, or or they just don't get it. So I work with athletes and families who have big athletic dreams, whether they want to go to the Olympics or they want to play in college or they want to play professionally. That's who I work with. That's who this I'm going to assume my audience is. And if that's not you, before you leave some hate-filled comment, please just think twice, because you may not be putting it into the right. Your comment may my topic may not apply to you, and so you commenting on it doesn't really make sense. But for everybody else, good stuff. So the first thing I wanted to talk about tonight was taking 100% responsibility. Okay. Now, I want to say I didn't learn about taking 100% or 100% responsibility as an athlete. I didn't really learn what that meant until later. Okay. I've shared before that kind of my Olympic path was not the most, everybody assumes that Olympians are 100% dedicated to their craft, and they are. But if their goal is not the be all and end all goal, then then their efforts can be fuzzy. And I never sat down with my coaches or my teammate and said, "Hey, we're going to win the Olympics. We're going to be Olympic gold medalists." Um, and looking back on it, I think that had we done that, that would have helped us. Okay. And eventually we split as a team, and that was like, that was totally cool. It wasn't cool at the time, but in retrospect, it totally worked out. And maybe I'll share more about that in another episode. But the idea of just setting out and saying, like, this is what I want to do, right? I want to be an Olympian, or I want to play sports professionally, or whatever it is. Okay. But setting that out and saying, like, this is what I want to do. Because in a lot of ways we were somewhat little, not wishy-washy. We were focused, like we wanted to do well, but we weren't anchoring ourselves against uh, that ultimate goal every single day. It was there, it was out there, but it wasn't like that was the thing we were shooting for. What we were doing, which a lot of people do in general, is we were kind of waiting to see success to then set the next goal and the next goal and the next goal. Okay. And so many years later, as a coach, I struggled with this idea. And the person that helped me kind of clarify it is a guy by the name of Jack Canfield. And so many years ago, I was enrolled in one of his coaching seminars, and he really helped nail down this topic for me, which I'm going to share with you today. So whether if you're a parent, I hope this is going to make a lot of sense for you. And if you're the athlete watching me, this is totally going to make sense to you. I find as the athlete, it can make sense kind of intuitively, but concretely, it can be hard. And so I'm going to encourage my athletes to get with somebody out that's not a coach. It could be a parent, but it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be like a grandparent, or it could be an uncle, or it could be a teacher that they trust, somebody like that, right? But we're going to go through some stuff today that's going to help really clarify this, because uh, right now in the kind of the COVID world, as I'm recording this, we are like a year into COVID, like just under a year. And COVID has thrown up a pretty good excuse for a lot of people, right? And whether you think it's you can use it as an excuse or not, it's not the point. I'm going to go through that today. But the idea here is that a lot of athletes are going, well, like the goalposts have shifted. It's like an extra hurdle has been placed. Sometimes for a lot of my athletes, a lot of hurdles have been placed, getting COVID tested, or getting, having to quarantine in a hotel for a while, or, for my summer Olympians who are like thinking that the Olympics might not even happen. Okay. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and with uncertainty can come like the abdication of responsibility, right? There's a lot of things that can seem totally outside of our control. However, when you look at things closely enough and you ask the right questions, and I'm going to go through some of these questions today, you realize that almost everything can be under your control to some degree. Okay. Like, so on a scale of 100, it could be 99% up to you, even though it may feel like it's like 50-50. Okay. So the important thing here is to understand that this applies to the most minuscule of goals, like on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, let's say you got to get to practice on time. Well, if you're late, what usually happens? We say like, oh, my, traffic was bad, right? That's a classic, right? Traffic was bad. I've never heard an athlete say, if they were late to practice, say, hey, coach, and I asked them, like, why were you late? Well, I've never heard an athlete say, like, oh, you know what? I forgot to put my clothes in the laundry last night, and so my mom did it for me today, but I didn't remind her soon enough, and so the laundry was late, and then I didn't want to come with like wet clothes, so we waited for it to dry. Then we got in the car, and I didn't have the directions right to this new field we're practicing on, and that's why I was late. I've never heard an athlete say that. And I think the day that I hear that as a coach, I will just be like, oh, like angels will sing, right? Because really, at the end of the day, wasn't the traffic that was late. It was the fact that an athlete slept in, or that they just weren't ready to leave on time, or they chose not to leave on time, right? So this can be like a simple thing as like showing up on time for practice, or it can be something as painful and complex as a abusive coach athlete relationship. Okay. Now I've dabbled in that topic, and what's really interesting is that that's probably the most painful example I can give. So I want to give it as a spectrum, okay? Because for those of you listening to me right now, wherever you are in the world, you're going to fall somewhere in that, okay? And we're going to talk about how even in the most extreme example, there's a way to look and go, all right, how can we take 100% responsibility for something that was as painful and maybe feels like it was done to us as opposed to something we chose to have done, okay? Um, One of the most important things I want to talk about, the reason why I want to talk about this today is because there's two aspects to this. One is as an athlete is pursuing their sport, okay, and they want to reach their goals, or as parents, we're trying to help them reach their goals. It's kind of we're cresting the mountain, right? But every athlete has a point where that mountain, they've reached the peak, their peak, right? It's not the ultimate peak. It's just each athlete has their own, they're climbing their own mountain, right? So on the backside of that mountain is where a lot of athletes falter. Okay. And I think one of the mistakes that athletes make in their career, and coaches enable and parents enable and things like that, is that when an athlete doesn't take 100% responsibility, what happens when they're on the backside is that they don't have ultimate closure to their athletic career. Okay. And this is something that I went through as an athlete. So I actually did it kind of twice. Once was as a luge athlete, when after the Olympics, we had a great Olympics, and our coaches were like, "You got to stick together. This is the way." The next year's when it all comes together, and it did sort of, but not great. And then we split as a pair. Now I had a choice at that point. I could have just left luge and gone to play college lacrosse, which was also an athletic pursuit of mine. Okay. I had been an All-American in high school, and now is my chance to make a break from luge and to go to school. And I chose not to do that because after having gone to an Olympic opening ceremonies, I realized that uh, going to play college lacrosse didn't compare. It didn't. It was like a step back for me. Now, for some of you guys listening to me right now, I know you've got lacrosse kids, and that's their dream, and that's cool. Like like I'm not taking away from that at all. We just all have these experiences that we can basically weigh against, right? So for me at the time, the idea was not to go back to school. So I continued with luge, and I did quite well, but then I ran out of money to continue. And so I left luge, but it wasn't like I left because I was bad at it. I left because I just didn't have the financial means to stick with it. And also I was a little upset at certain things. I was upset at the coaches for not meeting me what I felt was halfway. And so I ended up leaving the sport, but a year or so later, I wanted to go back into the sport. And really, a lot of athletes do this because they don't have complete closure in their sport, and then they feel like they got to fall back into it, right? For whether as an athlete or then as a coach, and and not that there's anything wrong with that, but if it's the right choice, if an athlete has closure and they come back as a coach, like this is what I want to do, that's one thing. It's another thing for an athlete to go like, oh well, I'm kind of confused in life outside of my sport, and I want to stay in this system that I know, where people are giving you your schedule and telling you what to do and what to wear, right? That's one thing. So closure to me is one of the most important things that an athlete can have once they're done with their sport. Okay, really, really important. So so, and when we take 100% responsibility to everything, then we can walk away having made the decision like I don't want to do X, Y, and Z, and therefore I am now transitioning to something else. So closure is something that's really important to me as a coach, because every coach you run into, like especially your technical coaches, right? Your technical coaches are there to make you better. So they, they're going to get frustrated with you when you can't execute based on their information. Okay. And this is where a lot of people have, a lot of parents and athletes have trouble with a coach. It's usually where there's a big coach breakdown, is when, and I wrote about this. I didn't write about this in my book, but I wrote about this on a blog post, and I did a video that's kind of on, that's on YouTube, and it's about a gymnastics coach that, where there was abuse there, and they were banned by USA Gymnastics. But I said in the video that I like shot on this topic was that like athletes and coaches have a breakdown when there is a perceived lack of performance, either from the athlete side, who thinks that the coach is not able to help them get to the next level, whatever that may be. Okay. Or it comes from the coach side, and the coach can look at an athlete and go, and think like maybe they're not working hard enough, or they're not serious enough, or they're just not getting it. Right. And that's where a coach, a lot of the problems people have with coaches has less about what they say and more about how they say it, right? How they go about or how they go about saying it. I had a mom send me a video of this coach who I was talking about, because people didn't watch the entire video and they think that I'm like basically apologizing for her behavior. I don't even know who this lady is, but the idea was that some mom, some like basically a bitter gymnastic mom, had videoed this coach and spliced together all these like bad looks the coach gave her athletes. And I'm like, I don't know, you could probably splice together a video of any coach and come up with some pretty good footage like that, right? But the idea here is that when athletes and coaches get to some sort of a split here, that's when the athlete, okay, the athlete has to take 100% responsibility. However, a lot of young athletes don't have all the skills. They don't have all the skills with which to manage all that, right? So that's where I encourage all my athletes and the parents of those athletes to be involved, okay? To be involved. A lot of parents will say, I don't want to be that parent, like quote unquote, that parent. And I ask them, like, define for me what that parent means, right? What does it mean to be that parent? Because everybody has a different assumption of what that parent is, and a lot of times they're way off. Okay, so for any of the parents that I work with who tell that to me, they say like, I don't want to be that parent. I'm like, listen, first and foremost, you never tell me that again. Like, I don't care. I'm going to help you be the parent you need to be, or we think you need to be, to help your athlete get to the next level. That's it, right? That's it. Because at the end of the day, if you leave because you didn't take some of these things I'm going to lay out here today, you didn't take those steps, you're going to be gutted. Like, you're going to feel bad, and you're going to keep that with you for a very long time. Okay. So we don't want to do that. Okay. So what does taking 100% responsibility mean? Okay. Now, like I just said, for a lot of young athletes, like, we don't know, like, they don't have the skill set yet to do all this stuff. I jokingly relate it to, you wouldn't send your athlete to go negotiate a purchase of a used car, right? You're not, like, that's, to me, that's like the worst experience I can probably kind of come up with. No offense to all my used car salesmen, you guys know you're well trained in sales, and you know what you're doing. And when somebody comes in front of you and they don't know what you're doing, you're just like, hey, I'm making money, right? So the idea is a lot of parents step back and they say, oh, I want my athlete to basically to be able to advocate for themselves. Sometimes I don't even know what that means, right? I don't even know what that advocate for themselves, like fight for themselves, fight for what they want. A lot of times the athlete doesn't know what they want, because they just want to play, they just want to compete, they just want to do what they know they can do, right? They just want to get on the field of play and do the technical stuff. And to be honest, the coach also wants to be able to share their technical knowledge and basically implant it into that athlete's head and say, do this. That's what I know how to do. And that's the coach saying, like, do this. Now, the coach may not have anything else. They might not have any other way to say it. Okay. And that's where, as the athlete, and the coach, there may become a disconnect because the athlete's like, I'm trying. And the coach is like, no, you're not. But really what's happening is the coach is like, I don't know how to say this any differently. And what the athlete is saying is, I don't understand you to make any change, right? And then it all falls apart. So we don't want that. Okay. So what does 100% taking 100% responsibility mean? It means giving up all your excuses. Okay. So, like I said, I learned a lot about this way later in life. Okay. Now, what do we do as athletes? Coach says, why did you do that? A lot of times the athlete goes, I don't know. And a great question back that I learned years ago from listening to, I think it was like Tony Robbins said this, was he goes, if you knew, what would it be? Right. So you always press back with, if your athlete says, I don't know, you say, well, if you knew, what would it be? And then they go, oh, okay. And then they think about it. Right. So when an athlete, instead of an athlete going like, oh, it was foggy or it was cloudy or it was too high or too low or too fast or too slow, whatever, those are all excuses. And so the question is like, okay, if you could have done better there, what would you have done? Okay. And then you come up with those sorts of answers. You got to give up the excuses. You also have to give up victim stories. Okay. Jody Hall, I see it. Paul, I see it. You also have to give your victim stories. Okay. Victim stories are like, oh, I got sabotaged by my opponent. I worked with an athlete last year who was dealing with a coach. This was probably um, the most painful, most egregious sabotaging of an athlete that I've ever seen from a coach. And the coach basically manipulated this athlete's equipment when only the coach could have done that, and then blamed the equipment failure on the athlete. Okay. And like I said, it was the worst thing ever. But so athlete in this case, obviously a victim, but the question goes, how could we have kept that from happening? Right. And then you start coming up with these other answers, right? I could have had somebody else watching my equipment as I was getting ready to compete in those last few minutes before competing. I could have, XYZ. We came up with this laundry list of things. So then that brings all the power back to the athlete. So no victim story. So like, oh, the coach doesn't like me, or the coach likes that other kid better, or that parent has more money than me, and oh, she also does the fundraising, and that's why her kid gets to play and my kid doesn't. Any of that stuff, that's all victim. Got to stop it. Okay, got to stop it. Another reason is that why the explanation of why you can't and why you haven't up until now, right? So I remember learning how to do the sport of luge, and in the old track in Lake Placid, it was a very technical track. It wasn't like any other track in the world. It was basically falling apart. Like the mountain was moving, and the curves weren't aligned right. It was dangerous in spots, but that's where we learned how to slide. And there was this one curve going from this transition from curve 10 into curve 11. And man, I would blank out. I would just overwhelm myself. And time was like flying, and I wasn't present, and nothing was going right. And I look back on that situation, and this is a question that I needed to ask myself was, why haven't I figured this out up until now? Like, what am I missing? And sitting down with other coaches and coming up with different answers, I would have had a better chance of fixing that error. So a lot of athletes go like, oh, I've always done it that way, or I'm only good on a Wednesday, or I only play well when I wear my favorite underwear, right? That I haven't washed in like since last season. And don't wash it, mom, because you're gonna wash away all the good luck, that sort of stuff. Okay. Um, Now, the next one's a really interesting one. It's blaming of outside circumstances. So a lot of these kind of overlap, but the idea here is like, oh, it wasn't my fault. uh, my teammate dropped the ball, or my coach didn't pick the right play, or the ref was horrible. Now, we've all had these situations where those things have gone. We've been in those situations where the ref has made a call, or it rained, or it was like really hot, and the athlete says like, well, oh, it was so hot, I couldn't compete well. It was, or worse, the parents go, oh, geez, honey, today's a really hot day, and basically what they're saying is like, I don't expect you to play well today because it's hot, right? And that's horrible. Like, a lot of times parents will do this out of love, like, oh my god, honey, here's like 4 extra Gatorades, and here's the cold wrap that I use on my hikes, and take that, and here's this little portable fan that I got at the dollar store, use that, it's got fresh batteries. Like, all that stuff is just creating excuses for the outside environment, right? We go from preparation to just basically preparing excuses to happen. We don't want that. Okay. So the idea here is like, of all the things that an athlete or their parents will go through here, excuses, victim stories, outside circumstances, this is the way I always am, that sort of, the athlete has to give all of that stuff up forever. Okay. And here's the critical piece. An athlete has to take the position that they've always had the power to make it different or make it right to produce a desired result. Okay. Now, when you're dealing with young athletes, this is really hard, because sometimes they just they still don't yet have the mental bandwidth to kind of really come, or the skill set yet to really believe this. But the idea here is that we need to let the athlete know that, hey, they're doing great with what they've got, but we have to oh, get out of here. Sorry guys. No, I don't know. God damn, derp. All right. That was weird. My phone just went ringing. But the idea here is that the athlete has always had the power, okay, to make this right and get the desired result. So I'll cover this a little bit more detail in a minute, but this really goes from the simplest lack of result, like, hey, I had a bad day today, to I'm dealing with an abusive coach. Right. Again, I'm trying to give you the biggest spectrum I can, from like the worst on one end to like something that's, everybody can kind of relate to on the other. There's a lot of people who want to have success in sport, and like, I guess, in life in general, but the idea is they're not willing to, for whatever reason. Okay. Now here's the thing. We do the best with what we know at the time. And so, for whatever reason, it could be ignorance, like we just don't know. It could be lack of awareness, right? It could be fear. It could be the idea of needing to be right, okay? Or needing to feel safe is another one, okay? So, there's an interesting sports kind of example of this. Was back, the New England Patriots lost a Super Bowl game ages ago, and at the time, Rodney Harrison was one of the best defensemen in defensive players in the NFL, as well as this guy named Junior Seau. And the Patriots playing with the New York Giants, and it came down to pretty much the final play of the game, and Junior Seau made a call. Right, this is like one of the most pressure-packed sports experiences I can give you. So Junior Seau made this call to blitz the quarterback, and Rodney Harrison didn't like the call, but yet at the moment, Junior Seau kind of had this, like, he was revered as a player. He'd come from San Diego, and he had this amazing season with the Patriots, and he was just this amazing football player. Unfortunately, he ended up committing suicide years later, due to like CTE and brain damage, but that's another story. But at that moment, final play of the Super Bowl, Rodney Harrison didn't, for whatever reason, right, go against what Junior Seau called, and they ended up losing. They ended up having a player, like, the bad coverage, and Eli Manning threw a pass in the end zone, and the Giants scored and beat the Patriots. And I think that was the year the Patriots might have gone. They were undefeated. They had won all their games, and they lost in the Super Bowl. So But when you look back on the situation and you take 100% responsibility, you start going like, for whatever reason, well, what was the reason? And you know, at the time, Rodney Harrison ran into all these, you know, weird dynamic things that he just probably wasn't prepared for, and neither was Junior Seau, right? And that's why they lost, right? But it takes a lot to look back at that and go like, you know, there was my call. So, but from an athlete's perspective, when they look back on this, they like, well, okay, I had the power to make this call. Then as they go forward, they now have it solved. They've taken they've taken that responsibility, and now what they've done is now they've learned. They've What I like to say is I want my athletes to suck up every amount of possible pain they can get out of a situation so that they can use that knowledge in the future. If they don't suck up all of the pain, they don't get all of the knowledge. Now, I love this quote. It's from Jerry Seinfeld, one of my favorite comedians. He says, pain is knowledge rushing in where it wasn't there before, right? You know, it's if you think about it, like you walk in the living room and you stub your toe, or you schmuck your shin on the coffee table. That is lack of knowledge. Oh, there's a coffee table there, rushing into you, right? But what you want is you want all of the pain. Okay. To use a really interesting example, I learned this from our midwife before our kids were born. We, as most parents, had that choice of, do we put like tennis balls in the corner of every table, and do we take foam and put it, you know, on the edge of the fireplace and this and that? And she said no. And we were like, why? And she goes, because what's going to happen is that your baby's going to learn, as long as you don't like let him like tumble down the stairs, but they're going to learn in bits and pieces. They're going to learn little bits of pain that are going to help them then avoid larger bits of pain. They're going to develop knowledge. And that always stuck with me. And sure enough, our kids, we never had any issue where they, you know, did something crazy. And I really attributed to that, to that approach that, listen, you want to basically, if you're going to have pain, you want to absorb it all so that you have all that knowledge to go forward with. Okay. So, so as we look back on those reasons, the critical piece to tell an athlete, and this is where people have a lot of trouble with this, is that at the moment, the athlete or the parent of the athlete chose not to exercise what power they had in the moment. Okay. So back to my angry gymnast mom stories. There's obviously been a lot of pain suffered by a lot of athletes, you know, especially in the gymnastics community, from the most egregious of stuff again. And I'm using egregious a lot today. That's a fun word for me to say, to the littlest of stuff. But the idea is that at the time, you know, we all have the ability to choose. And for whatever reason at the time, and usually a lot of other times, you know, the athlete chose not to speak up, or the parent chose not to speak up. And partially it might be because of the environment they're in. I mean, we all understand that like the smaller the sport, or the smaller the club or whatever, usually there's less checks and balances. Okay. And we need to have that. So you know, sometimes you get in as an athlete, you get into a situation. I experienced this with luge. I experienced this with lacrosse. I experienced with this with other sports too. You get in a situation where you may have a coach that is like all powerful, and you can't do anything right then and there, and your chances to move to another club may be limited. But at the moment, right, what could happen is an athlete or a parent of an athlete could help bridge the gap between the athlete and the coach, and just say, hey, like, we're in this together. We're trying to reach the same goal, right? What can we do here? Right. And as opposed to choosing to go separate ways, right? And then just getting bitter and angry and festering, whatever, and that, because that never works. And that doesn't lead to the good closure that I want athletes to experience when they finally walk away from their sport. Okay. So really, really important. Okay. So why don't people exhibit that power when they have the choice? It doesn't matter, because it's in the past. The only thing you can do now is make good choices going forward. I like to say this: you did the best with what you knew at the time. Okay. When I was learning how to do luge and we went to Germany and I flew off the end of one curve, I did the best with what I knew at the time. As I'm flying off the end of one curve in that blissful peace where there's no sled noise, it's just you wishing through the air before your head and your body slams into the next curve of ice, right? I just I did the best with what I knew at the time. Now I sucked up all that pain and I learned from it and I went back and then I fixed that error, right? So I can't go back and fix it. I can only now take what I learned and move forward. So you do the best with what you know at the time, okay? And for a little bit of a Yoda moment here, to know and not to do is not to know. Sometimes people are like, oh, I know that. I know that. No, you obviously you don't. Because if you're not doing it, but you know it, you don't know it. Right. So to know and not to do is not to know. Okay. Really, really important. Um, all that matters is that from this point forward, you choose, okay, you choose to, you have a choice. You choose to act as if you are 100% responsible. Okay. So whether you are dealing with a coach or dealing with a new skill, or you're not, um, I deal with a lot of goalies, and if a ball or a puck goes by them, and they get all upset, you just go back to, hey, did you see it? Did you know where it was going? Did you move in front of it? And then at some point there's a breakdown. Well, when you take 100% responsibility of that whole thing, no, I didn't see it. I was screened. Well, what could you have done to have seen the puck or seen the ball? Oh, well, I could have adjusted now you start getting answers, because when you take 100% responsibility, you get answers. Now, the key piece here, guys, is the key piece here is developing curiosity. Okay. I encourage all my athletes and my parents to be curious. I was reading today about Elon Musk. Okay. And I don't know why I emphasized Musk like that. Musk. I always thought that was a really weird, like, fragrance on men, like Musk. Who was Musk? Anyway, I digress. The story was about how Elon Musk decided how to build rockets. Like, he basically picked up, he had an interest in rocketry, and he got a book on Russian how to on like a book by Russians on how to build rockets. But then when he got to the stage where he could actually build rockets, he he did this thing. And do I have the page up? Can I find it? Probably not. Um, it was called, Principles. Hold on. Let me just see if I can pull this up. Principles. Principles. First principles? I'm not going to find it. Sorry. Basically, what he did was, and I wish I could find the words for this exactly. I'm sorry. I'll try to post it later. But the idea was that he broke down a rocket into its component parts, into the commodities that they were made out of, right? So this is steel, this is aluminum, that piece is copper, this is this. And he realized that the cost to build a rocket on his own was 2% of what it would be if he went out to actually buy a rocket, right? And you can buy rockets, you can go to Russia, you can go to NASA, you can do these things. But that type of thinking is what gives you fantastic answers, and it all comes down to curiosity, right? So I encourage all my athletes to be really curious about their sport, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, right? So um, when you have that curiosity, you come up with more answers. And when you take responsibility, 100% responsibility, you come up with more curiosity and then more answers, which is great. So when something doesn't work for our athlete, we have to ask, you know, how did we make that happen? Right? So, like, if you go out today and your athlete has an event and they lose, question is like, well, how did I create that? How did I create that loss? Like, that's different than saying like, oh, we lost today. What could I have done better? It's like, no, wait a minute. How did you create that loss? What did you do today that actually made the loss happen? And I love that approach. I wish I had known that when I was younger. I think that that would have really helped me as an athlete. So that's why I'm kind of sharing it today. The idea of like, well, why, how did you create that? What was I thinking at the time? And if the athlete is like, I don't know what I was thinking. No, you got to be, as an athlete, you have to be aware, you have to be present, you have to understand, like, at this moment in time, I was freaking out because I was going so fast, or I was cold, or my visor fogged, or my skates were dull, or, whatever it may be. The idea then is that you start coming up like, what was I believing at the time? Right? Did I believe that I knew everything, or did I not know about how to navigate this corner? Or did I choose not to know? And this is a great question we'll get into in a second. Did I choose not to know that that athlete was way bigger than me, and I thought I could beat him, but I couldn't, how did I prepare? Those things. How did I get, this goes back to our coach's question or coach's situation. It's like when a coach gets angry and people freak out on the coach, no one asks themselves, what did I do to get my coach to react that way? Right? How did I get the other person to act in that manner? Right? That's a question that people don't ask. I love when people go like, "Oh, that coach should never be around kids." Really? That coach has like 15 other kids to deal with. And your kid that day was the straw that might have broken, the camel's back sort of thing, right? It was like the last thing. Or that coach has been working with your athlete over and over and over again on the same problem, and your athlete isn't doing the things necessary to fix it. That's not the coach's problem. That's your athlete's problem. Now, if you are a concerned parent listening to me right now and you go like, well, no, but the coach should know how to teach him. Listen, that's all well and good, but not every coach is like that. But what could you do in that situation? You could go to that coach and say, hey, all right, listen, way before you ever get to this point, but like we've got a disconnect here on this thing. Like, why are we not doing this well? Why are we not executing this skill well? The coach will say, like, in my opinion, your athlete is doing this. But another thing I encourage all my athletes to do, just like a doctor, doesn't hurt to get a second opinion. You've probably had, if your athlete has been involved in their sport for a while, you probably have a coach in your past you can go to get a second opinion. You might have a coach that you've never worked with, but you could maybe get on the phone with and say, hey, can I ask you a question? What do you think about this? And not in a confrontational way to your current coach, but you're just facilitating a conversation to get the desired result, because your coach wants them to be good, right? Your athlete wants to be good. You want them to be good. So the question you need to do is ask, when something doesn't go right, what do I need to do differently next time to get the result that I want? Right? That's key. It's key. Okay. So you got to ask those questions. Okay. So I want to just take you through these exercises real quick. Okay. These questions, and I'll try to post them up here. I might not get to Nick Saban. Well, let me talk about Nick Saban real quick. And again, I don't care if you don't like college football. I'm not a huge fan of college football, but Nick Saban is somebody to learn from. And what's really interesting is that in this COVID year, there's no surprise to me that the coach that has won 6 national championships won his 7th. Why? Because he wasn't about to let COVID stop them. It was a matter of doing whatever it took to navigate through this set of hurdles, right? So yeah, COVID throws up. I bet if we have another pandemic or something different, or like a tornado rips through Alabama and takes their stadium away and all their training facilities, they would find a way to win. Why? Because he takes 100% responsibility, and that's an attitude that he perpetuates to his entire team. Okay. He teaches that to his entire team. When they walk onto campus, when they walk onto campus, they know they're there to win a national championship. I heard just this past week a quote from a Division III coach, right? And I think the coach is a baseball coach. The misconception in a lot of collegiate sports is that Division I is like really serious, Division II not as serious, Division III not as serious as Division II. That's not true. Your approach to your game is important regardless of like what level you're at. I freaked out on when this is so full transparency here. In my 30s, my late 20s, early 30s, I got involved in the sport of bobsled up in Canada. And going from luge to bobsled was like going from a Ferrari to a truck. And I had plenty of driving skills, and I had been an Olympian in that sport. And but what do? You join the local bobsled club here in Calgary, and I was part of the provincial team, which is Alberta. And I remember we went out to Whistler, and this was before the Olympics. And the interesting thing here was that you could, hey McKenna, good to see you. You could, we had to train, and here I was with this like local provincial team, and we showed up to train, and I got really upset because there was no like we didn't start the sessions on time, and guys didn't have their sleds ready to go, and we were wasting session time. And I had a German coach and I had European coaches that had drilled into me like, no, you start on time, you do these things. Like, and I got really pissed at the local coach because I'm like, this is driving me crazy. Let's go. And he was trying to be like fair to everybody. And so even though like I was ready to go and ready to get first sled off at the top of the session, he would like rotate through like the worst kids to make them, so they had runs. And I got really upset. And he said, this isn't the Olympic team. The funny thing was all the guys that I was competing with, most of them wanted to make it to the Olympics. And my response back to him was, you don't develop the attitude of being an Olympian once you make the Olympics. You develop that attitude as soon as you know you can do it. And that's what I tell all my athletes. Is like, I don't care if you're like U10, you can have the right habits, you can adopt those habits right now, and you can develop that responsibility as soon as you want to develop it. You don't have to wait. Okay. So Mike Lane Performance, hey buddy, good to see you. Loves this topic, something I continue to preach to my athletes. Ownership of the journey is critical for success. Exactly. And I think what Mike, I know you might agree with this. Jeff Osadik might agree with this as well, who's on this idea that, you know, as coaches, as your technical coaches want you to develop this level of attention to detail as soon as possible, right? And just like the parent out there who gets sick of yelling at your kids to empty the dishwasher or pick up their clothes or take out the garbage, do I have to ask you twice? Like, as soon as you just go like, listen, I'll do it. You now can work towards the next level of thinking. And the sooner you can get to the next level of thinking, the better everybody gets, right? The quicker everybody gets. Nick Saban has a level of respect, right, where everybody knows what they're getting with him. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't give that same amount of respect to their local coach or their volunteer coach or their junior national development team coach, right? They think that, oh, once I get to the national team, then I'll get a better coach and they'll be able to talk to me in the way that I can survive or I can succeed. And that's not true. It's not true. So one of the things I do with my mental performance school athletes and my athlete breakthrough blueprint athletes is I have them go through a personality profile. Okay. Because now this is not like personality profiles are not set in stone. Okay. Personality profiles are guidelines. When I was young, I was taught that they were a box. Right. And the first one I did was when I retired from the Olympic team in the US. And I took one and I thought and I was told by a psychologist that this is the thing. This is me. This is me in a box. And I was like, what we know now is that you're not stuck with your personality, but knowing what your tendencies are can help you navigate these situations, especially with athletes in team situations. I know now that I'm fairly introverted. Like I'm extroverted here, but I'm fairly introverted. And in a team environment, yes, I would go out and have a beer and I would drink and I would have a good time, but I really just kind of wanted to be someplace else. I'd be just as content being back in my hotel room, watching TV or reading a book or doing whatever. Right. So that's just one example of many. But with a personality profile, you can understand that, hey, all right, in this situations, I don't like conflict, or I don't like, um, I'm a perfectionist, or those sorts of things. You can start to understand a little bit about yourself, and it can help you navigate, like, why don't I confront my coach in certain situations, right? Why don't I um, stand up to the bully, or why don't I get enough sleep, or why am I, you know, disorganized? Like, what's up with that, right? So, so it's really important to understand. Um, so a couple questions that you can always ask here, right? This is really important. Okay. So whatever you have going on in your life, okay. Now sport has brought us all together here on this Facebook Live, on this podcast, whatever you're seeing me. But you can apply this anywhere in your life. So the first question you ask is like, what is? I'll try to get this up as a banner. Um, I don't know. So, what is a difficult or troubling situation in your life right now? So, let's say you're an athlete and you're having difficulty with a skill, or you're having difficulty with your coach because you're having difficulty with a skill, or you're having difficulty with your parents, or you just got diagnosed with cancer. Whatever, you can apply this to what's going on. So, the first question you ask is, so how are you creating or allowing it to happen? Okay. So, you just gotta ask, how are you creating and allowing it to happen? Okay, whatever that situation is for your athlete, that's what you got to ask. And as a parent looking in from the outside, like, let's say your athlete is having trouble with the coach, you can say, like, how are you creating, or allowing this situation to continue, right? Or you say, like, oh, I'm just letting my athlete advocate for themselves. You're just not, you're not, you don't want to stick your nose in there. Okay. Right. But maybe you should, but why aren't you? Okay. Uh, this is one of my favorite. This is my favorite question. What are you choosing not to know? Okay. What are you choosing not to know? So I had an athlete a couple of years ago who did get diagnosed with cancer, right? And the athlete was, for all intents and purposes, and this for a lot of the people listening to me who are Olympians or high level athletes, they'll all attest the fact, like, you go for a physical every year and you go to your doctor, and your doctor basically like breezes you through the physical. They're like, oh yeah, you're an Olympic athlete. Pff, you're healthy. Well, healthier than who? Right? What are you choosing not to know? I'm choosing not to know that an Olympic athlete can be as sick or sicker than somebody who smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Okay. That wasn't me, but it can happen. Right. And we know now a lot more about, like, the work of stress in the body and things like that. So what this athlete had to ask, like, what are they choosing not to know? They're choosing not to, they're choosing not to know that, wow, an athlete can be really sick even though they're an athlete. So what do we got to look at? Right. And then that started the ball rolling. Okay. Um, this is a good one. What's the payoff for keeping it as it is? Okay. So on one side, you can have an athlete who is not doing something very well, but they're getting extra attention from the coach, and they like the extra attention from their coach. But if they fix the error, they don't get the they don't get the attention from the coach anymore, right? On the flip side, let's say you have an abusive coach, right? And you're not addressing it, where the athlete chooses not to go to mom or dad and say what happened with the coach because they think the coach will then get fired, or the coach will cut him, or whatever. What's the payoff for keeping it as it is? Well, athlete's still on the team. They still have the chance to continue, because they don't think that if they leave the team, they'll get the same chance, or they don't want to quit, any of those things. But there's a payoff for keeping it as it is. And that's a really tough question to ask. And it's a really tough thing to admit, that you may be doing. Okay. So, um, here's one. What would you rather be experiencing? right? Now, this seems kind of silly because as an athlete, you go like, what would I rather experience? Well, I don't want to be experiencing, flying off the end of S1 in Koenigsegg, which is a German track that some of you guys will know. For those of you guys who don't know, luge will not know, but you know, I'd rather not be flying off the end of this curve. I'd rather not be getting friction burns on my elbows and on my ankles. I'd rather not be letting balls go by me in the cage. So what would I would rather be experiencing a nice ride coming down the hill. I would rather be experiencing a coach who is not maybe like verbally abusive because they're upset with me because I can't get this right. I'd rather be experiencing those things. Because when you ask that question, when you say I'd rather experience that, you then your brain starts to work on the reasons to help get you there. Okay. Because it's like complaining, right? You can complain about something. Oh, my coach is an ass. The ref sucks. That girl's a bitch or he's a dick, like whatever, pardon my mouth, but right. But so what would you rather be experiencing? Well, I'd rather that person like me. Okay. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you create a relationship there? Right? Because if you go back to what's the payoff for keeping it like it is? Well, the payoff for keeping it like it is like you don't have to feel that uncomfortable, weird moment where you go up to that person and say, "Hey, I want to fix this. Like, can we get to a different spot? I feel like you're angry with me, or I'm trying hard, but I'm obviously not getting it. I'm not understanding it, but I'm taking responsibility for it. I need your help. Will you help me?" Okay. Um, and so these last two questions, okay, what actions will you take to create that new experience, right? So when you say like what would you rather be experiencing? Well, I want this outcome. Well, what actions will you take to create that outcome? And this is where the personality profile comes in, because if your athlete, is like a church mouse and they're really conscientious and they're really agreeable and they don't like being disagreeable, the act of going up to anybody and asking for something else can seem really, really hard. Or let's say, dad's working two jobs, mom is two to buy equipment, and the athlete, needs new equipment and justifiably needs new equipment, but they don't want to go to mom or dad and say, "Hey, I need this," because they're afraid mom or dad are just going to bite their head off and say whatever. Well, could the athlete, is there another way to earn money to make that happen? Right? What actions will you take to create that? And the last question to ask is, by when will you take that action? And the answer here is usually sooner rather than later. Okay. I've got an athlete I'm working with currently, and I was shocked to learn that they didn't have a strength and conditioning program. As great as this athlete was technically, they weren't really doing anything to speak of in the strength and conditioning kind of side of things and that physical ability component. And when I shared this with the athlete and the dad, who's really involved, and like I said at the very beginning, I don't care if a dad or mom is that parent. If we're working towards the goal, then be that parent. If being that parent means you care about your kid and you want things to happen for them, then let's go, right? And so what was great was when I shared this with them, they immediately took action. I made some phone calls for them. I did some research as part of their part of the program, and then as soon as I kind of had the guy locally to work with, they were on it, on it. And I'm really excited to see what happens with that athlete, right? So that's, when will you take that action is critical. Now, what I just want to leave you all with here is that sometimes you don't get the same result from your sometimes your closest coach is not always the best coach to talk to. Okay. And like I said, the smaller the sport, sometimes if there's difficulty with the coach, the relationship's not there. It's hard to start it up. Okay. Or it's hard to repair it. But what I encourage everybody to do is to kind of have a third party that they can bounce ideas of. That's where I think a lot of people join my program is because they want like an unbiased person to give them that advice. But you may be able to find that with, like I said, a past coach or a local coach, but that's not maybe your current coach. Um, just somebody you can confide in. Okay. That's why when athletes ever get in situations where they have sexual abuse from a coach, my first question is like, who did that athlete have to talk to? Right. And why didn't they have someone comfortable to talk to? They could share that, like, hey, this happened to me. I'm not sure, like, I'm not sure if it was right or not, but I'm not sure if this is like, you know, coach protocol, like if this is the way it's supposed to be, right? And this is the same, that's the same question, whether it's like sexual assault from a coach or you rewind to like the 70s and the 80s to like communist East Germany state sponsored doping programs. Like those athletes will also say the same thing. Like I had a coach who was giving me stuff, right? Giving me pills. And they had nobody to go like, is this right? Right? Is this okay? Right? So I encourage all my athletes to have that third party, uh, that unbiased third party view of their athletic pursuit, and to be able to avoid those really negative situations, but also to help them be aware of it's, you know, in business, you know, like there's terms for this, like having a group of people around you that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of and share, because the idea is that with multiple minds you get a better result than just having one single mind. And a lot of athletes end up operating in a silo, like they like on an island. Sorry, that's a better way to look at it. So I have a third party. Who is that? We have a third party. Who is that? I can't see who that is on here. I apologize. It's not Mike Lane, and it's not McKenna, and there's Linda Gosnell. Hey, Cowbell, I'm back on the track soon. Cowbell, awesome. Linda Gosnell, good to see you. Oh, there, Rob Shepard, got it. There you go, Rob Shepard. That's Rob Shepard. You were giving away our secret, man. That's awesome. So, but proud of you guys. And Rob Shepard's son is one of the kids I'm talking about there, who just is taking action. So, have that third party. Okay, take responsibility. I'm going to back up to the very beginning where I said, like, my little disclaimers when I do these calls, when I do these Facebook Lives, I work with athletes who have big, and families who have big athletic dreams, the big aspire. So my advice is not for everybody. When I tell people to take 100% responsibility, like, no, no, yeah, I know, yeah, you said that and all, but the coach is still a jerk. I'm like, yeah, what are you doing to keep that? Like, what do you know, what's the payoff of keeping it like it is, right? What's the payoff? That you feel safe. You don't have to get disagreeable with somebody. Really important. Okay. So really important to kind of know how you're coming at things, because when sport is done for you, okay, and this, I'm going to leave you with this. When sport is done for you and your athlete, I want you to be able to walk away happy. My experience in the sport of luge, which a lot of you guys have no clue what I'm talking about, and that's fine. But the idea is this: a lot of people leave luge very bitter, very upset, very bitter, and a lot of it stems from not just taking 100%, from the athlete taking 100% responsibility, and the parents who support them. Okay, because why? Every dollar you put into this, every amount of time, every drive you take, every fast food meal you have in the car, every missed opportunity, like for the parents, every opportunity cost that you have, okay, I want you to walk away going, we did everything we could and it didn't work out, and we're happy with that. And we're on to the next thing with all of the things we've learned from all the pain, all the knowledge we learned from all that pain. We're now going on to something, the next phase of our life. And our athlete can also walk away going, yeah, you know what? I did my best. It didn't work. It didn't work for me for whatever reason. Okay. And then you can move on clearly. So if that helped you, do me a favor, please. If you're watching me, if you've watched all the end, congratulations. Please leave me a like, a thumbs up, a heart, a comment. If you're watching the replay, same thing. Please leave a comment or like. The algorithm really likes it. Gets a lot of traction after the fact. To everybody who watched today, Linda, Rob, Mike, Jeff, Janet, Cheryl, I'm losing people, Jody, Jody, what's Jody writing on Instagram? I think it's important for me as a parent to have a mentor to go to and talk things out with. She's been amazing to talk to because I've found I just need to stand on my tongue. Well, Jody, I'm going to leave you with this though, Jody. You might not need to stand on your tongue, and obviously there's a lot of stuff you could be thinking and talking about, but don't let that other person hold you back if they haven't reached for those same goals. I'm just going to speculate, Jody, but a lot of times moms, um, um, sometimes moms want to speak out, they want to do something, and they've got another mom who is like just basically, what's the word? When you facilitate what someone's already thinking. Uh, Come on, I know this. Not a facilitator, enabler. Thank you, enabler. Right? If you're biting your tongue and all you have is somebody with you who's just like you or less than you in whatever at realms, and they're just enabling you to just bite your tongue. Listen, you may have a valid point to discuss with somebody. Now, if you're barking at the ref on the field, that's a different deal. Okay, but if there's something strategically wrong with the approach you feel is happening, or you have some doubts, you've got to be able to talk that over with somebody not on your level but higher up, who's maybe brought an athlete through that situation. Okay, and that's where sometimes if you know Jody, for lack of a better term, you don't have to be a dick about it, right? But you can facilitate a good conversation to get an answer, because if it's nagging at you over and over and over again, right? I like this quote. It comes out of a book called A Course in Miracles, which is kind of a weird book, but if you want to really blow your mind, you can read it. But every communication that we had, and Jody, this is when you see like scary mom or dad on the sidelines. The idea is that every every spoken word, every voice. Sorry, I'm losing my words tonight for some reason. I need dinner. But the idea is everything is either an act of love or a cry for help. Okay. So when a parent yells and cheers for their kid, act of love, right? When this is a tough one, when their teammate gets crushed, um, they and they um, and they yell out and they ref this cry for help. Or if their kid gets hurt, that's that's a different that you can basically break everything down to those 2 points. So Jody writes, she's raised 2 goalies and her husband is an official with the MLL, so it's sound advice. Okay, it's better than somebody else, but I'm still gonna. Jody, you got to email me. Tell me what it is. Coach Edwards at athletespecific.com, because I'm curious what the topic is now. You piqued my interest. Okay. So anyway, everybody, I'm off to dinner. We got a roast in the oven. So wherever you all are in the world, listen to this. Thank you so much. Couple things. Head on over to athletespecific.com. Get on the newsletter by downloading the freebie I've got over there called the Guide to Dealing with Automatic Negative Thoughts for athletes. Okay, that just puts you on my newsletter list. Love to keep in touch, and I want to know kind of where you are in the world, what you're dealing with, and I'll be back on now every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, doing these. We'll be taking the audio. The audio will be on iTunes. It's also on YouTube. So all that good stuff, guys. All right. So thanks to everybody, and I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.